The alien girl faced a terrible fate, until a human stood between her and doom. The silent scream from Sector 9. The emergency signal captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of her ship's bridge, feeling the familiar vibration of the engines through the hull. The Wanderer's Hope wasn't much to look at, a converted mining vessel with more scars than paint. But it was home. Her salvage crew had been working the Outer Rim for 3 years now, pulling valuable tech from abandoned stations and derelict ships. "Captain, we're picking up a distress signal," called out Marcus Webb, her ship's xenobiologist and communications officer. His voice carried an unusual tension that made Sarah turn around immediately. "Where's it coming from?" Sarah asked, moving to stand behind his workstation. The display showed a faint signal pulsing from the direction of Kepler Station, an old research facility that had been abandoned after a reactor leak 5 years ago. Marcus adjusted the frequency, and suddenly the bridge filled with a sound that made everyone freeze. It wasn't the standard distress call they expected. Instead, it was something far more disturbing, a low, haunting melody that seemed to carry desperation and pain across the void of space. "That's not human," whispered Torres, their engineer. "Never heard anything like it." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In her years with the Earth Coalition Navy and then as a salvage operator, she'd heard many distress calls. This one was different. This one sounded like a cry for help from someone who had given up hope. "How far to Kepler Station?" she asked. 6 hours at full burn, Marcus replied, still staring at the readout. "But Captain, that place has been dead for years. The radiation levels were supposed to be fatal." Sarah studied the signal pattern on the screen. Whatever was sending this signal was very much alive and in serious trouble. Every instinct told her to be cautious, but something deeper, something fundamentally human, wouldn't let her turn away from a plea for help. "Set course for Kepler Station," she ordered, "and prep the radiation suits. We're going in." Approaching the station, the Wanderer's Hope dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Station 6 hours later. Through the main viewport, Sarah could see the massive research facility spinning slowly against the star field. It looked like a dead thing, dark, cold, and lifeless. But the distress signal was stronger now, and it was definitely coming from inside the station. "Scans show minimal radiation," Marcus reported. "Whatever caused the evacuation has been contained or dissipated. But there's something else, Captain. I'm detecting active life support in Section 9, and there are ships docked at the station. Big ones." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What kind of ships?" "Unknown configuration, but they're heavily armed. Military class, I'd say." Torres looked up from his engineering console. "Captain, if someone's using that station as a base, they might not appreciate visitors." Sarah stared at the dark station, weighing their options. They could turn around and pretend they never heard the signal. It would be the smart thing to do. But that haunting melody continued to play over their communication system, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that someone was counting on them. "We're going aboard," she decided. "But we go armed and ready. This might be a trap, but it might also be someone who needs our help." The crew prepared quickly, checking weapons and equipment. Sarah had served in 3 border conflicts before becoming a salvager, and she knew how to read a tactical situation. Whatever was happening on Kepler Station, it wasn't good. Inside the station, the docking bay was eerily quiet as the Wanderer's Hope connected to the station's airlock. Sarah led her small team through the passages, following the source of the distress signal deeper into the facility. The corridors were dimly lit, and their footsteps echoed strangely in the artificial atmosphere. "Life support is active in this section," Marcus whispered, checking his scanner. "Someone's been maintaining it recently." They moved through the abandoned research labs, past empty chambers that had once housed cutting-edge scientific experiments. The signal grew stronger with each step, leading them toward the lower levels of the station. As they descended, Sarah began to hear something else beneath the haunting melody. Voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. The sounds were harsh, clinical, and somehow cruel. "Movement ahead," Torres warned, raising his weapon. Sarah motioned for silence and crept forward to peer around the corner. What she saw made her stomach turn with rage and disgust. The discovery: the chamber beyond was brightly lit with harsh white lights. Medical equipment lined the walls, but this wasn't any kind of healing facility. In the center of the room stood a metal table with restraints, and around it moved several figures in dark uniforms. They were tall, with gray skin and elongated limbs, a species Sarah had never encountered before. But it wasn't the aliens that made her blood boil. It was what they were doing to the figure strapped to the table. She was clearly not human, with pale blue skin and long silver hair that shimmered under the harsh lights. Her large dark eyes were filled with terror as she struggled weakly against the restraints. The aliens around her spoke in cold, clinical tones as they prepared some kind of medical procedure. Specimen 847 shows optimal genetic markers for the breeding program, one of them said in accented standard. The Zerathian physiology will provide excellent compatibility with multiple species. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She'd seen enough war crimes in her military service to recognize one when it happened. This wasn't medicine. This was systematic abuse designed to create hybrid offspring for some unknown purpose. The sedation is taking effect, another alien reported. We can begin the procedure in 5 minutes. The blue-skinned woman's eyes swept the room desperately, and for one moment they locked with Sarah's through the observation window. The alien girl couldn't speak, but her expression conveyed everything Sarah needed to know. This wasn't consent. This was violation on the most fundamental level. Marcus appeared beside Sarah, took one look at the scene, and went pale. "My God," he whispered. "We have to do something." The decision Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Her crew was small, just 3 people against what looked like a full military operation. The smart thing would be to retreat, report what they'd found to the authorities, and hope someone else would handle it. But looking at the terror in the alien woman's eyes, Sarah knew there wasn't time for proper procedures and official channels. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. "Torres, how many hostiles do you count?" she asked quietly. 6 in the main chamber, maybe more in the adjoining rooms," he replied, checking his scanner. "They're armed, but they're not expecting trouble." Sarah made her decision. "We're going in, hard and fast. Priority is getting that woman out of there." "Captain," Marcus protested, "we don't know what kind of diplomatic situation we're walking into. These could be legitimate researchers." Sarah looked at him with eyes that had seen too much war and too much cruelty. "Marcus, look at her face. Look at the restraints. This isn't research, it's torture. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let it happen on my watch." She checked her weapon one more time and looked at her crew. "Anyone who doesn't want to be part of this can stay with the ship. No judgment. But I'm going in." Torres grinned grimly. "Hell, Captain, where you go, we go. Besides, someone's got to keep you from getting yourself killed." Marcus nodded reluctantly. "The interference pattern suggests they're jamming communications. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast before they call for reinforcements." The rescue Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the familiar calm that came before combat. She'd learned long ago that hesitation killed more soldiers than enemy fire. When you knew what was right, you acted. "On my mark," she whispered, positioning herself at the chamber entrance. "Remember, we're here to save her, not to fight a war. Get in, get her out, get back to the ship." She kicked open the door and burst into the chamber with her weapon raised. The aliens spun around in surprise, reaching for their own weapons, but Sarah was already moving. "Step away from her," she shouted, advancing toward the table where the blue-skinned woman was restrained. The lead alien, a tall figure with elaborate markings on his gray skin, snarled something in his own language before switching to standard. "Human, you have no authority here. This facility operates under hegemony jurisdiction. The only jurisdiction I recognize is the one that says people don't get tortured," Sarah replied, keeping her weapon trained on him. "Release her. Now." The alien's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. This specimen is vital to our breeding program. She will produce offspring that will serve the hegemony for generations." Sarah felt her finger tighten on the trigger. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," the alien said, and suddenly the chamber erupted into violence. Sarah dove to the side as energy bolts sizzled past her head. Torres returned fire from the doorway while Marcus moved to the control panels, trying to release the restraints holding the alien woman. The battle was brief, but intense. The aliens were skilled fighters, but they hadn't expected resistance. Sarah's military training took over, and she moved through the chamber with deadly efficiency, putting down threats with precise shots. When the smoke cleared, 6 alien bodies lay on the floor. Sarah rushed to the table where the blue-skinned woman was still restrained, her large dark eyes wide with shock and confusion. "It's okay," Sarah said gently, holstering her weapon and working on the restraints. "We're here to help. My name is Sarah. Can you understand me?" The woman nodded weakly. When she spoke, her voice was melodic, despite her obvious fear. "I am Kira Veltar of the Zarathian Diplomatic Corps. They captured my ship 3 days ago. I thought no one would come." Sarah felt her heart clench at the relief and gratitude in the alien woman's voice. "Well, you thought wrong. Can you walk?" Kira tested her legs as Sarah helped her sit up. "I think so. But there are others. Dozens of them in the lower levels. Other species, all being held for the same purpose." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't just one isolated incident. It was part of something much larger and more horrible. "Captain," Torres called urgently from his position by the door. "We've got company coming. Looks like a full security squad." Sarah helped Kira to her feet, noting how the alien woman moved with surprising grace despite her ordeal. "We need to go. Now." As they headed for the exit, Kira grabbed Sarah's arm. "The data cores," she said urgently. "They have files on hundreds of worlds, thousands of captives. If you could get that information to the Galactic Council." Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded and moved toward the computer terminals. "Give me 2 minutes." "We don't have 2 minutes," Torres warned. "They're almost here." Sarah made another split-second decision. "Marcus, grab what you can. Torres, cover the corridor. Kira, stay close to me." As her crew worked frantically to extract the data, Sarah found herself studying the alien woman they'd rescued. Despite everything she'd been through, Kira carried herself with dignity and strength. There was intelligence in her dark eyes and something else, a fierce determination that reminded Sarah of herself. "Got it," Marcus announced, pulling a data crystal from the terminal. "Basic files, but enough to prove what's happening here." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors outside. Sarah gripped her weapon and looked at her. Small group, her loyal crew and the alien woman they'd risked everything to save. "Time to go," she said, "and this time we're taking everyone we can with us." As they prepared to fight their way back to the ship, Sarah caught Kira's eye and saw something there that gave her hope. The alien woman wasn't just a victim anymore. She was ready to fight back. The real battle, Sarah realized, was just beginning. Across the void of Star's flight from Kepler Station, the corridors of Kepler Station echoed with the sound of running feet and shouted orders in the harsh alien language. Sarah led her group through the maze of passages, Kira staying close beside her while Marcus and Torres covered their rear. The data crystal containing evidence of the hegemony's crimes felt heavy in Marcus's pocket, carrying the weight of thousands of lives. "Left here," Sarah directed, consulting the mental map she'd built during their approach. The station's emergency lighting cast everything in an ominous red glow, and the sound of their pursuers grew closer with each passing moment. Kira moved with surprising agility despite her recent ordeal. Sarah noticed that the alien woman seemed to know the station layout better than she'd initially indicated. "There's a service tunnel ahead," Kira said, pointing to a maintenance hatch. "I explored it during my first day of captivity before they increased security." Sarah didn't question how Kira had managed to explore while imprisoned. Clearly, there was more to this diplomatic courier than met the eye. "Lead the way." The service tunnel was cramped and dark, forcing them to crawl single file through the metal conduit. Behind them, Sarah could hear their pursuers discovering their escape route, but the narrow passage would slow down any pursuit. 20 minutes later, they emerged in the docking bay where the Wanderer's Hope waited. Sarah's relief was short-lived, as she saw 3 hegemony soldiers guarding her ship, their weapons trained on the airlock. "Torres," she whispered, "can you get us a distraction?" The engineer grinned and pulled a small device from his toolkit. "Emergency beacon. When it goes off, it'll simulate a hull breach alarm on the other side of the bay." The device activated with a shrill warning sound, and 2 of the guards immediately moved to investigate. Sarah and her team rushed the remaining guard, taking him down quickly and quietly. "Everyone aboard now," Sarah ordered as they reached the airlock. "Marcus, get us undocked. Torres, I need full power to engines in 30 seconds. The Wanderer's Hope detached from Kepler Station just as hegemony reinforcements flooded the docking bay. Sarah felt the familiar surge of acceleration as her ship leaped away from the station, but she knew their troubles were far from over. "Captain," Marcus called from the sensor station, "we've got 3 heavy cruisers launching from the other side of the station. They'll be in weapons range in 4 minutes. Sarah dropped into the pilot's chair and her hands flew over the controls. The Wanderer's Hope might not look like much, but Sarah had spent 3 years modifying her engines and defensive systems. "Strap in, everyone. We're going to find out just how fast this old girl can really go." The chase begins. The stars streaked past the viewport as the Wanderer's Hope jumped to hyperspace, but Sarah knew they couldn't outrun military vessels for long. The hegemony cruisers would have better engines and more advanced tracking systems. "How long until they can follow us?" she asked Marcus. "Maybe an hour if we're lucky," he replied, working frantically at the navigation console. "But they'll know our general heading. We need a plan." Sarah looked back at Kira, who had remained silent during their escape. The alien woman was studying the ship's interior with curious eyes, but Sarah could see the weight of trauma still affecting her. "Kira," Sarah said gently, "we need to know what we're up against. How many facilities like Kepler Station does the hegemony operate?" Kira's expression darkened. "Hundreds," she replied. "They've been expanding the program for 5 years, targeting species with specific genetic traits. The Zarathians were chosen because our physiology allows for cross-species compatibility, but we're not the only ones." Marcus looked up from the data crystal he'd been analyzing. "According to these files, they've captured representatives from over 40 different species. They're trying to create hybrid soldiers with the best traits from each race." "Soldiers? For what?" Torres asked. Kira's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Conquest. The hegemony believes that genetic purity leads to weakness. They want to create a master race by combining the strengths of all species, then use those hybrids to subjugate the galaxy." Sarah felt her blood run cold. She'd seen enough war to understand the implications. If the hegemony succeeded, they wouldn't just conquer worlds. They'd destroy the genetic diversity that made each species unique. "We have to stop them," she said firmly. "With what army?" Torres asked. "We're 4 people in a salvage ship." "Sometimes 4 people are enough," Sarah replied, remembering her military training. "The right information in the right hands can bring down empires. We need to get this data to someone who can act on it." Kira leaned forward. "The Galactic Council has peacekeepers, but many member worlds have representatives who might be compromised. The hegemony has been building alliances for years. What about neutral territory?" Marcus suggested. "Freeport Haven maintains independence from all galactic governments. They might be willing to help." Sarah nodded. Freeport Haven was 3 days away, but it was their best option. "Plot a course, but keep us away from major shipping lanes. I don't want to lead the hegemony to innocent civilians." As the ship settled into its new heading, Sarah found herself alone with Kira in the small galley. The alien woman was attempting to eat the standard rations Sarah had provided, but her hands shook slightly as she lifted the spoon. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, sitting across from her. Kira was quiet for a moment before answering. "I was trained as a diplomat. We learned to find common ground between species, to build bridges of understanding. But the hegemony..." She paused, searching for words. "They see other beings as resources to be harvested. How do you negotiate with monsters?" Sarah recognized the pain in Kira's voice. She'd felt the same way after witnessing atrocities during her military service. "You don't negotiate with monsters," she said simply. "You stop them. understanding each other. Over the next 2 days, as the Wanderer's Hope made its way toward Freeport Haven, Sarah found herself spending more time with Kira. The alien woman was intelligent and curious, asking questions about human culture and technology. In return, she shared stories of Zerathian society. Your people value harmony above all else, Sarah observed after Kira described the consensus-based government of her homeworld. Yes, but perhaps to a fault, Kira replied. When the hegemony first approached us, many of our leaders believed we could find a peaceful solution. By the time we realized their true intentions, they had already infiltrated our diplomatic corps and learned our weaknesses. Sarah poured herself another cup of coffee, a luxury she allowed herself during long voyages. In my experience, predators always target the peaceful first. They see mercy as weakness. And yet you risked your life to save me, Kira pointed out. Your species has a reputation for violence, but you showed more compassion than many so-called civilized races. Sarah considered this. Humans are contradictory that way. We can be incredibly violent, but we also have a strong instinct to protect the innocent. Maybe it's because we've been both predator and prey throughout our evolution. The hegemony fears humanity, Kira said quietly. I heard them talking about it during my captivity. They see humans as unpredictable, chaotic. Most species expand in predictable patterns, but humans seem to appear everywhere at once. We're explorers by nature, Sarah agreed. Always looking for what's over the next hill or around the next star. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent beeping from the bridge. Sarah rushed to the controls to find Marcus pointing at the sensor display with a grim expression. They found us, he announced. 2 hegemony destroyers just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Sarah studied the tactical display. The enemy ships were faster and more heavily armed than the Wanderer's Hope, but Sarah had a few tricks they might not expect. Torres, reroute power from life support to engines. We only need it for the next hour anyway. What's the plan, Captain? Marcus asked. Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. We're going to show them why you never corner a human. The running battle. The Wanderer's Hope shuddered as the first energy blasts from the pursuing destroyers struck her shields. Sarah threw the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers, using every trick she'd learned during her military service. Shields down to 60%, Torres reported from the engineering station. Sarah spotted an asteroid field on the navigation display and smiled grimly. Hold on, everyone. We're going rock hopping. The ship plunged into the dense field of spinning rocks and ice chunks. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, threading the needle between massive boulders while the hegemony destroyers struggled to follow. Their larger ships had more difficulty navigating the tight spaces, but they kept up the pressure with long-range weapons fire. There, Kira pointed to a particularly large asteroid with deep fissures. We could hide in one of those cracks. Good eye, Sarah said, steering toward the asteroid. But we're not hiding. Torres, prepare the mining charges. Torres grinned as he understood her plan. Aye, Captain. 1 avalanche coming up. The Wanderer's Hope flew close to the asteroid's surface, dropping mining charges into the deep cracks Kira had spotted. As the hegemony destroyers closed in, confident they had cornered their prey, Sarah triggered the explosives. The asteroid split apart in a chain reaction, sending massive chunks of rock flying in all directions. One of the destroyers was caught in the debris field and suffered severe damage to its engines. The other was forced to retreat to a safe distance. That bought us some time, Sarah said, bringing the ship about. But they'll call for reinforcements. We need to reach Freeport Haven before the entire hegemony fleet shows up. The damaged destroyer was trying to limp away from the asteroid field when Kira made an unexpected request. Can we help them? Sarah stared at her in disbelief. Help them? They were trying to kill us. They're also fellow beings, Kira replied quietly. The hegemony may be our enemy, but those are individual lives at stake. If we let them die, how are we any different from the monsters we're fighting? Sarah wrestled with the decision. Every military instinct told her to leave the enemy ship to its fate, but looking at Kira's earnest expression, She remembered why she'd gotten into this fight in the first place. "Marcus, send them our emergency frequencies," she ordered reluctantly. "If they want help, they can ask for it without weapons." The response came 15 minutes later. The damaged destroyer requested assistance with their wounded, but only if Sarah's crew came aboard unarmed. "It's a trap," Torres warned. "Probably," Sarah agreed, "but we're going anyway." An unexpected alliance. The interior of the Hegemony destroyer was sleek and efficient, but Sarah could see the damage from their asteroid trap. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated with each power surge. The Hegemony captain was a tall, gray-skinned alien with piercing yellow eyes. He studied Sarah with a mixture of respect and suspicion as she and Marcus boarded with medical supplies. "You are the human who destroyed our research facility," he stated rather than asked. "I'm the human who stopped a crime against sentience," Sarah replied firmly. "Your people were torturing innocent beings." The captain's expression didn't change. "I am Commander Zethkar. I have served the Hegemony for 30 years, believing we were building a stronger galaxy. But after reviewing the data from Kepler Station..." He paused, struggling with his words. "Perhaps there are lines that should not be crossed." Marcus was treating wounded Hegemony soldiers with the same care he would show any patient. Sarah noticed that several of the crew members watched him with curious eyes, as if they'd never seen an enemy show compassion before. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked the commander. Zethkar looked around at his damaged ship and wounded crew. "I do not know. The Hegemony will consider us traitors if they learn we accepted help from you. But I cannot continue to serve an organization that commits such atrocities." Kira, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke. "Then don't." Both Sarah and the commander looked at her in surprise. "Don't serve them," Kira continued. "Help us expose what they're doing. You have access to their communications, their fleet positions. You could save thousands of lives." Zethkar's yellow eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The risk would be enormous. If we were discovered..." "If you do nothing," Sarah interrupted, "those research facilities will keep operating. How many more species will suffer what they tried to do to Kira?" The commander was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with a decision that would change everything. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well. But we cannot do this alone. We will need allies and a plan to reach the galaxy's attention without being silenced by Hegemony forces." Sarah felt a surge of hope. Maybe 4 people really could make a difference after all. Betrayal at Freeport Haven. Freeport Haven hung in space like a massive jewel, its lights twinkling against the darkness. The independent station served as a neutral meeting ground for traders, diplomats, and refugees from across the galaxy. As the Wanderer's Hope approached the docking bay, Sarah felt optimistic for the first time in days. "Remember," she told her crew and passengers, "we're just traders looking for supplies. No mention of the Hegemony or the data crystal until we can find someone trustworthy." The station's interior was a bustling maze of shops, cantinas, and meeting halls. Representatives from dozens of species mingled in the corridors, conducting business or seeking passage to distant worlds. Sarah led her group toward the administrative sector, hoping to find someone in authority who would listen to their evidence. They were stopped by station security before they reached the administrative offices. Sarah Chen, the security chief, a burly Tellurian with cybernetic implants, asked, "You're wanted for questioning regarding an incident at Kepler Station." Sarah's heart sank. "On whose authority?" "Hegemony representatives arrived 3 hours ago with a warrant for your arrest," the chief replied. "They're offering substantial compensation for your cooperation." Sarah looked around and realized they were surrounded. Kira stepped closer to her, and Sarah could see the fear returning to the alien woman's eyes. "I assume cooperation isn't optional?" Sarah asked. The security chief's expression was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Captain Chen. Business is business." As they were escorted to the detention level, Sarah caught Kira's eye and mouthed silently, "Trust me." They were placed in separate cells, but Sarah had noticed something during their escort through the station. Commander Zethkar and his crew were already here, being held in a different section. The hegemony had moved faster than she'd expected. That night, as Sarah lay on the hard bench in her cell, she heard a familiar sound drifting through the station's ventilation system. It was the same haunting melody that had first drawn them to Kepler Station, Kira's distress call, but changed somehow. Instead of desperation, it now carried determination and hope. Sarah smiled in the darkness. Kira was calling for help, but this time she wasn't calling to be rescued. She was calling others to join their fight. The real battle for the galaxy's freedom was about to begin, where hope burns brightest, the underground network. The detention cell on Freeport Haven was small and sterile, but Sarah had been in worse places. She lay on the narrow bunk, listening to the hum of the station's life support systems and planning her next move. The hegemony representatives would arrive tomorrow to take her and Kira back to their facilities, but Sarah had no intention of letting that happen. The soft scraping sound at her cell door was so quiet she almost missed it. A maintenance panel slid open, revealing a narrow service tunnel. Marcus crawled out first, followed by Torres and two aliens Sarah didn't recognize. "How?" Sarah whispered as Marcus worked on the cell's electronic lock. "Your friend Kira has some interesting abilities," Torres replied quietly. "Turns out that melody she's been singing isn't just a distress call, it's a communication system. She's been talking to every imprisoned alien on this station." The lock clicked open and Sarah stepped out of her cell. "Where is she now?" "Coordinating the largest prison break in Freeport Haven's history," Marcus answered with a grin. "The station's holding over 200 beings who were captured by the hegemony. Kira convinced them all to work together." Sarah felt a surge of admiration for the alien woman she'd rescued. In less than 24 hours, Kira had transformed from victim to leader, organizing a resistance movement from inside a prison cell. They moved through the maintenance tunnels toward the detention center, where Kira was being held. Along the way, they encountered other small groups of escapees, Tellurians, Andromedans, even a few species Sarah had never seen before. All of them moved with purpose, following a coordinated plan. The hegemony made one critical mistake, said one of their alien companions, a tall insectoid being with multiple arms. They assumed we would remain isolated by species barriers. Kira showed us that cooperation transcends biological differences. They found Kira in the central detention area, standing before a mixed group of prisoners from a dozen different species. Her silver hair seemed to shimmer in the dim light as she spoke in low, urgent tones. When she saw Sarah approaching, her dark eyes lit up with relief and determination. "Sarah," Kira said, moving toward her. "The situation has changed. We're not just escaping anymore, we're striking back. What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she could already see the answer in the faces of the assembled prisoners. These weren't broken victims anymore. They were angry, organized, and ready to fight. A massive reptilian being stepped forward, his scaled hide bearing the scars of recent torture. "I am Korath of the Saurian Defense Corps. The hegemony destroyed my homeworld to harvest genetic samples. They have taken everything from us." An elegant, bird-like alien with iridescent feathers spoke next. "The Avari Collective lost 12 colonies to their breeding programs. We demand justice, not just freedom." Sarah looked around the group, recognizing the shift that had occurred. What had started as a rescue mission was becoming something much larger, a rebellion. The gathering storm commander Zethkar appeared in the detention area, having been freed by his own crew working with the prison break operation. His yellow eyes held a new resolve as he approached Sarah and Kira. "The hegemony transport arrives in 6 hours," he reported, "but I have received communications from sympathetic elements within the fleet. There are others who question the breeding program, but they need proof of its full extent." Marcus held up the data crystal they'd stolen from Kepler Station. "We have proof, but we need a way to broadcast it across the galaxy before the hegemony can silence us." "Freeport Haven's communication array could reach every major system," Kira suggested. "But the station administration has been compromised by hegemony bribes." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders. These beings were looking to her for leadership, expecting her to have answers she didn't possess. But she'd learned long ago that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about making decisions when no one else would. Then we take the communication array, she declared, and we make sure the entire galaxy knows what the hegemony has been doing. The planning session that followed was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Representatives from dozens of species contributed their unique abilities and knowledge to create a comprehensive assault plan. The Tellurians provided technical expertise for accessing the station's systems. The Saurians offered their natural strength for breaching fortified positions. The Avari used their aerial capabilities for reconnaissance. But it was Kira who provided the most crucial element: unity. Her ability to communicate across species barriers had created something unprecedented, a truly integrated multi-species military force. The station falls. The assault on Freeport Haven's command center began before dawn station time. Sarah led a mixed team through the maintenance tunnels, while Commander Zethkar's forces created a distraction at the main security checkpoint. The coordination was flawless, with each species contributing their strengths to overcome obstacles that would have stopped any single group. The station's security forces were caught completely off guard. They'd prepared for individual escape attempts, not a coordinated military operation involving 200 prisoners working in perfect harmony. Sarah's team reached the communication center just as the first hegemony reinforcements arrived at the station. Through the control room's windows, she could see enemy ships taking up positions around Freeport Haven. "They're jamming all outgoing transmissions," reported the Tellurian technician working at the communication console. "Can you break through?" Sarah asked. "Not from here," the alien replied. But if someone could reach the main transmitter array on the station's outer hull. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the hegemony ships. "That's a suicide mission. The transmitter array is completely exposed." "I'll go," Kira said. Quietly, Sarah turned to stare at her. "Absolutely not. You're too important to risk." "I'm the one they want most," Kira replied. "My genetic profile is the key to their breeding program. If I'm outside the station, they won't risk destroying the transmitter array." The logic was sound, but Sarah's instincts rebelled against the idea. She'd rescued Kira from one certain death. She wasn't about to deliver her to another. "There has to be another way," Sarah insisted. Commander Zethkar spoke from his position, monitoring the enemy fleet movements. "The hegemony commander is requesting to speak with you, Captain Chen. He's threatening to destroy the station if you don't surrender." Sarah looked around the control room at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, all united in their determination to expose the truth. The weight of their hopes and the lives of everyone on the station pressed down on her. "Put him through," she ordered. Confrontation in the void. The holographic image of a hegemony admiral materialized in the center of the control room. He was an imposing figure with elaborate ceremonial markings covering his gray skin and cold, calculating eyes that seemed to take in every detail of their situation. "I am Admiral Krexthul of the Hegemony 4th Fleet," he announced. "You have interfered with classified military operations and stolen sensitive data. Surrender immediately, and I will ensure your deaths are quick." Sarah stepped forward, meeting the Admiral's gaze without flinching. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the independent vessel Wanderer's Hope. The only thing I'm surrendering is evidence of your war crimes to the galactic community." The Admiral's expression remained unchanged. "You are in possession of stolen hegemony property, including genetic samples vital to our defensive preparations." "Genetic samples?" Sarah's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You mean sentient beings you've kidnapped and tortured? The inferior species serve a greater purpose," Krexthul replied dismissively. "Their sacrifice will create a new generation of warriors capable of defending civilization against the chaos that threatens us all." Kira stepped into view of the holographic projector, and Sarah saw the Admiral's eyes widen slightly with recognition. "Specimen 847, he said with satisfaction. "Your cooperation will ensure the success of our breeding program." "My name is Kira Veltar," she replied with quiet dignity. "I am a daughter of Zerathia, a diplomat of the Galactic Council, and a free citizen of the galaxy. I am not your specimen." The Admiral's composure cracked slightly. "You will be returned To our facilities where you will fulfill your biological destiny, whether you cooperate or not. Sarah felt her anger building to a dangerous level, the casual way the Admiral discussed Kira's fate, as if she were livestock rather than a living being, reminded her of every atrocity she'd witnessed during her military service. "Over my dead body," Sarah said, her hand moving toward her weapon. "That can be arranged," the Admiral replied. "You have 1 hour to surrender, or I will begin systematically destroying sections of this station until you comply." The transmission ended, leaving them in tense silence. The broadcast Marcus was the first to speak. "We need to get that data transmitted before he makes good on his threat. The jamming field is too strong," the Tellurian technician reported. "Even if someone reached the external array, we'd need to overload the station's entire power grid to punch through their interference." Torres looked up from the engineering console where he'd been working. "That would kill power to life support, artificial gravity, everything. The station would be uninhabitable within minutes." Sarah absorbed this information, calculating their options. They could fight the hegemony forces, but they were vastly outnumbered. They could attempt to negotiate, but the Admiral had made it clear that surrender was the only acceptable outcome. Or they could sacrifice themselves to ensure the truth reached the galaxy. "Do it," Sarah ordered. "Captain," Marcus protested, "if we overload the power grid, we won't survive long enough to see if the transmission gets through." "Maybe not," Sarah agreed. "But thousands of other beings will have a chance to live free because of what we do here." She looked around the room at her crew, at Kira, at Commander Zethkar and all the other beings who had joined their cause. "Anyone who wants to leave should do so now. This is going to be a one-way trip." No one moved toward the exits. Kira stepped forward and took Sarah's hand. "On Zarathia we have a saying, 'The stars remember those who choose light over darkness.' We will be remembered." Sarah squeezed her hand gently, drawing strength from the alien woman's courage. "Torres, begin the overload sequence. Marcus, prepare the data for transmission. Everyone else find something to hold on to. This is going to get rough." The lights flickered as Torres began rerouting power throughout the station. Warning alarms sounded as life support systems began shutting down to feed more energy into the communication array. Outside, the hegemony fleet detected the power surge and began moving to attack positions. But Admiral Krexthul hesitated, unwilling to destroy the station while Kira was still aboard. That hesitation proved fatal to his mission. The light that conquered darkness. The power overload reached critical levels just as the first hegemony weapons opened fire. The station shook under the bombardment, but the reinforced communication array held long enough for Marcus to initiate the data burst. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds and hundreds of space stations, communication receivers picked up the signal. The stolen files from Kepler Station began broadcasting automatically, spreading like wildfire through communication networks faster than the hegemony could react to stop them. On the core worlds of major species, government officials watched, in horror, as evidence of the breeding programs filled their screens. On remote colonies, settlers saw the faces of missing friends and family members among the victims. On military bases, officers realized the true scope of the atrocities being committed in the name of galactic security. But the broadcast contained more than just evidence of crimes. It included Kira's message of unity, her call for all species to stand together against those who would reduce sentient beings to genetic resources. It showed the cooperation that had made their mission possible, proof that different species could work together toward a common goal. In the control room on Freeport Haven, the lights went out as the power grid finally collapsed. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow as the station began to die around them. "Transmission complete," Marcus announced, his voice steady despite their desperate situation. "The entire galaxy knows the truth now." Sarah looked around at the faces of her companions, aliens from across the galaxy who had chosen to stand together in humanity's darkest hour. "Then we've won. Whatever happens next, we've won." The station shuddered as another barrage from the hegemony fleet struck home. But instead of the expected destruction, Sarah heard something else, the sound of weapons fire from multiple directions. "Captain," Commander Zethkar called from the sensor station. "You need to see this." On the flickering display screen, Sarah could see ships arriving from hyperspace. Dozens of them, then hundreds, representing every major species in the galaxy. The broadcast had done more than expose the hegemony's crimes. It had created an instant alliance of every civilization that valued freedom. Admiral Krexthul's fleet found itself surrounded by an armada of unprecedented scale and diversity. The hegemony ships caught between the dying station and the advancing fleet had no choice but to surrender or be destroyed. Epilogue: A New Dawn. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Justice Station, watching. Ships from across the galaxy dock at the massive facility. The station had been built in record time through unprecedented cooperation between species, serving as both courthouse and symbol of unity. The trials of hegemony leaders had concluded the previous week, with Admiral Krexthul and his conspirators sentenced to life imprisonment. More importantly, the breeding facilities had all been shut down, and the thousands of captives had been returned to their homeworlds. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Kira's voice came from behind her. Sarah turned to see her friend approaching, now, wearing the elegant robes of the Zarathian ambassador to the new Galactic Alliance. The trauma of her captivity had faded, replaced by the confidence of someone who had helped change the course of history. "It's incredible," Sarah agreed. "A year ago, most of these species barely acknowledged each other's existence. Now look at them." Through the viewport they could see beings from dozens of worlds working side by side, building something that had never existed before. A truly integrated galactic community based on mutual respect and cooperation. "The Council has made their decision about your commission," Kira said, handing Sarah an official document. Sarah read the orders with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had been appointed as the first director of interspecies rescue operations, charged with preventing atrocities like the hegemony breeding program from ever happening again. "Think you can handle it?" Kira asked with a smile. Sarah looked out at the ships from across the galaxy, remembering the desperate fight in Freeport Haven's control room and the moment when the truth had set an entire galaxy free. "I'll manage. After all, I've got the best crew in the galaxy to help me." Behind them, Marcus and Torres emerged from a conference room where they'd been briefing new recruits on rescue operations. The Wanderer's Hope had been retired, replaced by a state-of-the-art rescue vessel crewed by volunteers from dozens of species. But more importantly, they'd all found their purpose in the new galaxy they'd helped create. A galaxy where freedom wasn't just a word, but a promise, backed by beings willing to fight for it. As Sarah watched the ships moving through space in perfect coordination, she reflected on how much had changed since that first distress call from Kepler Station. One human's decision to help a stranger had sparked a revolution that transformed the entire galaxy. Sometimes, she realized, one person really could make all the difference. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, full of possibilities and new challenges. But Sarah Chen, former salvage operator turned galactic protector, was ready for whatever came next. After all, she was human,